That is a fabulous way to start. You guys rock the house. You're awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm Petra Weldis, Senior Minister, Spiritual Director here at the Center for Spiritual Living, and I am delighted that you braved the rain to be with us this morning. And I was thinking about that. I was in Colorado this last week, and it was cold. It was really cold. And there was a big spring snowstorm, 6-8 inches of snow. It was awesome. But I'm ready for flowers. And so when I grew up, it was April showers bring May flowers, right? So I know we'll be grateful for the beautiful rain and how it nourishes us. And I'm so grateful that you're with us today, and trust that you will be nourished in just the same way, that you will be fed and your hearts will be lifted and something will touch your mind in a way that is new. We're starting a whole new topic this month. We're walking the path to enlightenment. And as we do this, we are moving through the Bhagavad Gita, which is an ancient Hindu scripture, and we're using as a companion book to that Ram Dass's book, Paths to God. Last month, in our Step Out in Faith, we spoke so deeply about prayer and moving ourselves into right relationship with the divine, moving ourselves into right relationship with that one. And as we are becoming more open to that relationship and speaking the truth from that place, the Bhagavad Gita takes it the next step and urges us to understand that we also have to act in the world. And the question is, how will we do that? So this month, building on last, as we are walking through our annual theme, this stuff really works. This science really works, but you have to work it. So prayer was how we work it in consciousness, and now as we do this exploration, it's how do we work it in the world? And how do we live spiritually in the world in a way that works? So I invite you to go along for this ride this month, and it made me chuckle. I have to tell you, I felt very mischievous when I decided we were going to read the Bhagavad Gita during the month we were celebrating Easter. So we're going to be exploring Krishna, Lord Krishna, and Lord Jesus Christ on Easter. Reverend Karen and I, and the music, and we'll have just a really rich conversation as we do this exploration. I also I had a lovely chance to see the video of last Sunday, thanks to Dick and his amazing work in videoing these services. Yeah, so that was really awesome. And I'd like to say thank you to Reverend Karen and Andrew Tinker for rocking the house. Yeah. And I got to go rest. It was great. But, it's always good to go, and it's way good to come home. So we'd like to welcome any of you who are here for the first time.
I'm Petra Weldis, Senior Minister of the Center for Spiritual Living in Dallas, and we're delighted that you found us here on the web. You can find our Sunday services on our website by every Wednesday. And we love that you can look at us online and explore these spiritual teachings. Feel free to explore our archives. It goes back a number of years with lots of special topics and amazing speakers. You can also sign up for our email news, My Daily Words, and my blog, Spiritual Living with Dr. Petra. If you're looking for a spiritual community, come visit us. Or if you're just in Dallas, drop on by. We'd love to give you a hug. Welcome home.
There we go. I've been asked to let you know what the words to this song are all about, because you wouldn't know unless you speak Italian. We're singing the song in Italian. It's from the movie The Mission. The soundtrack is by Ennio Morricone. And the tune itself is called Gabriel's Oboe, and it's been made famous, words have been put to it by Sarah Brightman. The words that the translation are, in my imagination, I see a fair world. Everyone lives in peace and honesty there. I dream of souls that are always free, like the clouds that fly, full of humanity in the depths of the soul. In my imagination, I see a bright world. Even the night is less dark there. In my imagination, there exists a warm wind that breathes on the cities like a friend.
Nella fantasia io vedo un mondo giusto, ni tutti buono e in pace l'onestà.
Io sono d'anime e sono sempre libere, come ne volene che volano, piangono vanità. In fondo l'anima. Nella fantasia io vedo un mondo chiaro, lì anche la notte meno scura. Sono d'anime che sono sempre libere,
Come le nuvole che volano, fiendo
sulla città con me amico. Io sogno d'anime che sono sempre libere, come le nuvole che volano, viendo vanità. In fondo all'anima.
Deborah West and Alan Brunton.
è il pubblico.
Thank you, Alan, Deborah, and Andrew. Thank you so much. There's so many different ways to have church, aren't there? Yeah. So many different paths that open our hearts. So, yeah, so how do we walk the path to God? How do we walk that path? You know, it's easy to feel lifted by music like that. It's easy to feel safe when we come here on a Sunday morning. And I often think when we have these experiences together on Sunday, I think that's what life is supposed to be like every day, every moment. But we leave here, don't we? And we go out into the real world. And life is carrying on out there. And there are those other people out there. Stuff happens. And how do we live in that? How do we move in that? How do we take that inner truth, that inner sanctuary, that beautiful place of being lifted and moved and opened? How do we take that into the world? Especially when often it feels as though not only is there stuff happening, but sometimes we're actually in battle. In battle with other people, in battle with ourselves, in battle with the culture, in battle with money, in battle with whatever it is. Doesn't it sometimes feel like that? And how do we find a place to move differently? That's what spiritual living is about. That's why we're called the Center for Spiritual Living, not the Center for Spiritual Thinking, or the Center for Spiritual Pretending, or the Center for Spiritual, wouldn't it be nice if life was like that way, if everybody else would be more spiritual? Right? It's the Center for Spiritual Living, to live more spiritually and to bring that into our daily life. We've so beautifully this last month, we've talked about the inner world, our world of prayer and the speaking of the word and the being present to the authentic truth of our being, the I am that I am, the spiritual divine reality, and speaking from that. And now we're invited to move from that, to move out into the world from that place. And our thread that we're going to follow is this beautiful book, the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a story. It's a story from the Hindu tradition encased in a giant story that's, I don't know, I think they said 12 or 20 volumes if it was all written down in one place. And it's a little bit like taking the Exodus story or the Noah and the flood story or the Jesus story out and reading that story by itself. The Bhagavad Gita would be like a story like that inside the scripture for the Hindu tradition, the Upanishads and the Vedas. And just like the Moses story would come out of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible from our biblical scripture. And so we lift this story out because it has been called the essence of Hinduism and has much to teach us about living spiritually. How do we move in the world from this place of spiritual truth? So because it's a story, I want to start with a story of my own. And I forgot to finish the story in the first service. A number of people reminded me of that, so don't let me finish that. But let me start with this story. So this was many years ago. My son was 7, I think, something like that. And we went to visit family friends in Montana. They had a beautiful house in the woods, a little cabin, and we decided we were going to go spend a month there. And one of the reasons was there was part of the family was a little 8-year-old girl. And of course, they'd both be off school at the same time, and they could play and have fun and do all those kinds of things. So sure enough, that's what we did. And we went hiking and fishing, and we had all kinds of adventures and did much fun stuff. And so one afternoon, I was with Jason and Aaron and at the cabin, and we decided that we would go ATVing, which was great fun. So we drove the ATV. There was a dirt road kind of around the field and up over behind the cabins and back down again, and maybe like a mile circuit kind of thing. And so we were going out there on ATVs, and mind you, I had an 8-year-old teach me how to drive an ATV. It was great. And and sometimes on front, and sometimes on the back, and sometimes just watching and having a grand old time. And then at some point, Jason said, "Mom, come on, can we drive the car? Let's drive the car out there." He said, "My dad's been teaching me how to drive the truck out in his property in Arizona. I know how to drive. Let's drive the car." In my infinite wisdom, I said, "Okay, let's do it. You guys are driving the ATVs. You're doing great." And so come on. And I remembered my first experience. I don't know, I was maybe 6, and my dad put me in his lap, and I steered, and he worked the pedals, going down the driveway to the garage door. I did not hit the garage door. I just want you to know. I drove down the driveway, and I was all excited, and I thought, oh, yeah, this will be fun. We can do this. So I got Jason on my lap. He was a little bit small, so I worked the pedals, and he did the steering wheel, and we drove around and around and around three times. I don't know. It was great fun. He was having a blast. Oh, I had a stick shift, so I was doing I was keeping us barely in second gear, so we couldn't, go wild. And so that was great. And so Erin she was a little older. She said, it's my turn. Come on, it's my turn. And I looked at her and I said, Erin, have you ever driven a car before? Do you know how to drive? Yes. Okay, well, I guess you have to start somewhere, so come on. Now, she was quite a bit taller than Jason, about a head taller, so she could actually reach the pedals. So she had the brake and the gas, and she had the steering wheel, and I had the clutch and the shift. And off we went. We went around, and we went around, and then one of those moments happened that you can't quite recall just exactly what happened. But the next thing I know, I'm reaching for the steering wheel. Erin, brake, push the brake. And of course, wouldn't you know, what she was doing was pushing more and more and more on the gas pedal. And as we were somewhat fighting over the wheel, there we were. We ended up in the ditch. So don't let me forget to tell you the rest of the story. But I'll tell you what, it could have been a battlefield. What battlefield are we living on? What's the battleground that we find ourselves on? This is the question the Bhagavad Gita starts with. Let me just set the stage. Like I said, this is a story taken out of a large compilation of stories. And at the beginning of this story, we have two opposing armies lined up on either side of the field, ready to do battle. When you read the Bhagavad Gita, this is the version I would really like to recommend to you. This version is translated by Dr. Edward Viljoen. He's the CSL minister in Santa Rosa. And he has done a compilation and a simplification of the text. Now, it's only downloadable. You can't purchase it as a physical book, but you can download it and read it on any device. You can, of course, use another translation of the Bhagavad Gita. You're welcome to do that. But I recommend this because he's taken out all the really esoteric Hindu references, and not using a lot of the Sanskrit words, and he's really tried to make it a paraphrased, easily understood translation. And so at the beginning of the story, we have these two these two battle lines drawn. And as in all good stories, of course, it's a family feud, right? And so there's brothers and uncles on this side, and cousins and brothers and fathers on this side, and they are ready to do battle. Why? Because they are, of course, fighting over the kingdom. And who inherits it, and who gets all the goodies? Sounds like a typical soap opera, doesn't it? And at the very beginning of the story, Krishna comes and says, okay, to the two heads of the two armies, I will give you all of my weapons and all of my strength, or I'll give you me. Which one do you choose? And the other guy, whose name I can't remember or pronounce, he says, oh, well, I'll take all your weapons and of all your strength. Of course, we want to be the winning army. I'll take all of that. And our other character, our hero of the story, Arjuna, he says, well, I just really only want God by my side, and so I'll take you, Krishna. And Krishna becomes his charioteer. Krishna, as you have no doubt figured out, is, of course, the God figure in the story. And so Krishna, as his charioteer, the very first thing Arjuna says, wait, before we have this big fight, I have to check it out. And he takes his chariot and he drives down the middle of the field, and he looks to his left and he looks to his right. As he's moving down the field, he looks to his left and he looks to his right, and he gets to the other end of the field, and he throws down his bow and arrow. He was a master archer. He throws down his bow and arrow, and he says, I cannot fight. I will not fight. There are brothers and uncles on both sides of the battlefield, and there will be mothers and aunts and sisters who weep at the end of this battle. I won't fight. And here we have the crux of how often we find ourselves on our own battlefield, on our own battleground, wondering, how shall we proceed? Do we fight or not? What can we do? How do we see it? Where will we stand in this moment? And so the stage is set for Krishna then to begin to educate Arjuna and us. Ram Dass says this: the Gita outlines a series of practices that, taken together, comprise a complete yoga for living our lives as a spiritual act. So the companion book that we're using, that you can get in our bookstores, called Paths to God, Living the Bhagavad Gita by Ram Dass. I highly recommend that you read the preface and the introduction, as well as moving through the book with us. He says this: the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, is both one of the most sacred books in India and also one of the most profound statements of yoga. In the West, many of us find that karma yoga, or service, is the most suitable practice, and the Bhagavad Gita is unparalleled as a statement of this form. Ram Dass says his appreciation for its unique appropriateness to our own cultural circumstance is unparalleled. The philosophy of the Gita is one that turns out to be especially suited for us in the West, because instead of encouraging us to turn away from the world, it turns our lives in the world into our spiritual work. So moving from this place of inner work, prayer and meditation, to taking our spiritual practice into the world. This is our work. And so we are invited to move authentically in the world. But first, we have to actually look at these battlefields, this battleground that we find ourselves on. So, Ram Dass goes on to say the Gita and Krishna. The Gita is Krishna, remember, and Krishna is a manifestation of our own inner being. So opening to the study of the Gita will open us in a profound way to our own deeper selves. So we can look at this conversation and recognize that this is a conversation that we are having with our higher self, or our higher self is having with us. And one of the reasons why I want us to explore the Bhagavad Gita is not only because of what it teaches us, but also because it shows us how we can relate to all spiritual scriptures. There's no Hindu who thinks that this story is a factual story, but they all know it's very true. And we recognize in the characters, we recognize parts of ourselves. And we are invited to relate to the character in a way that is educative, that invites us into a new relationship with life, with the things that are going on, with ourselves, with our deeper self. Now, this figure of Krishna is very, very interesting. Ram Dass says this about this figure of Krishna. Here it is. Hang on. We have to understand that this is an aspect of God we're talking about here in the same way that Jehovah is. Krishna is an expression of a certain quality of God. But whereas Jehovah may be a righteous face of God, Krishna is the loving, playful, rascally aspect. It felt so good to be around him that wherever Krishna went, everyone wanted to hang out with him. Krishna is perhaps the most joyful avatar we have. He was always laughing, playful, active, enthusiastic. He was like warm, radiant life itself, which is an incredible image to have of God. So, our first understanding of moving out in spiritual living is to recognize this understanding that we have of the divine, What is our image? What is our picture? What is our understanding? And how do we gain that personal experience of the one? Well, of course, as we talked last month, we gain that personal experience through prayer, through meditation, through the inner life, through the inner awareness of ourselves. And then we find ourselves on the battlefield. You see, what happened in this story that I started to tell you, when we landed in the ditch, Aaron started to cry. My son started to cry too because he'd smacked his head on the windshield and cracked the windshield. Yes, but there was no blood, which was good. And Aaron started to cry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It's okay, honey. Nobody's bleeding. We're all fine. It's all right. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. No, really, it's okay. Come on, we'll get out of the car. Let's just get out of the car. We'll go back to the house. We'll call somebody for help. She was beside herself. And I realized she was terrified of me. She was terrified. So we walked back to the house, and I had my arm around both of them. I was like, hey, you know what? Really, okay. It's okay. We're just going to get help. So I called the dad, and I said, okay, the car's in the ditch. We need a little help here, please. Could you see if you can come get it out? And he came, and he and his wife came, Aaron's parents, and and then there were more people coming, and then they were trying to drag the car out of the ditch. And sure enough, finally they got the car out of the ditch, and everybody piled back at the house, and Aaron's mother marched her to me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. And I looked at her, I said, honey, it's okay. Really, it's okay. Her mother did not know how to respond. She was sure that I was furious, that I was going to start yelling at somebody somewhere along the line, that her daughter was in massive trouble, and that I don't know what she expected me to do, but she did not expect me to say, it's okay. And she looked at me and she said, well, I made sure that Aaron apologized. Really, oh my goodness. And I think and I could see her, she was going to start punishing her daughter. And I was like, wait a minute. I was the one who let them drive the car. An 8-year-old and a 7-year-old. Hello? What was I thinking? Okay, the field really looked flat. It did not look like it had any ditches in it. But Aaron apparently found the only ditch in the field. She and her mother both expected me to do battle. And they didn't know what to do, and I didn't. Because I took responsibility. I took responsibility that I was the one who said okay. And I was the one who'd made it possible. And what was there to be angry about? How often do we find ourselves on the battlefield? And who is it that we're doing battle with? So often it's some them out there, some person, our spouse, our child, our boss, or it's some political arena, or some economic system, or some corporation, or some whatever it is. And there's always some them out there that we want to do battle with. Or we find an inner battle, that we're battling with our own addictions, or our inability to practice what we preach, or our wounds we do battle with, or our habits. Krishna suggests to Arjuna that the most important battle, the biggest battle that we find ourselves in, is our belief that we are in battle around life and death. And he says, well, yes, you're right. There are people who are going to die in this war on both sides. And that's what we think. We think the worst thing that's going to possibly happen is we're going to die, right? I'm going to public speak. I will be so embarrassed. I will die. If I don't get this job, I will die. If I don't have enough money, I'll become homeless. I'll get really cold in the winter and I will die. Isn't that, if we spin it out far enough, our deepest fear is that we will die? Okay, I have news for you. You're going to die. This body will get laid down, but I also have news for you. There's an eternal, immortal, deathless, changeless aspect to the spiritual truth of who we are. In Science of Mind, we believe that we were before we were born, and we will be after we die. Now, Ram Dass, being a good Hindu, goes on for a whole chapter on reincarnation in response to this recognition that we have to stop doing battle with death. Science of Mind neither affirms nor denies reincarnation. We have lots of people who love the idea of reincarnation. Ernest Holmes himself, who synthesized the Science of Mind, had nothing particularly against reincarnation. He himself supported a theory, a spiral theory, of ever-expanding growth for our consciousness as we move through the realms and as we grow and evolve over eons of time. The Science of Mind has no definitive idea about what happens after we die, other than because we are made in the image and likeness of the divine, we recognize that we are eternal, immortal, deathless, changeless beings. It's only the body that we lay down. And so if we will stop doing battle with death, do you see we can begin to live? Because we can embrace life differently. We can embrace it from the deep reality that we know who we are, and that we don't need to fear this ultimate thing that's going to happen anyway, and we don't need to try to avoid it. And by embracing it differently, we have an entirely different place to stand. Do you see? And we stop doing battle with death, and we start living our lives. As we engage in this life in a new way, one of the next battles that we find ourselves in is to act or not to act, to engage or not to engage. I cannot tell you how many people come to me and they say, well, I don't know, should I get out of the relationship or should I stay? Should I take the job or should I not? Should I quit or should I not? Should I invest or should I not? What should I do? And my answer is there's no right answer. There's only your answer in the moment. To act or not to act. It doesn't have to be a battle. It is a recognition of allowing the truth of who we are to move us. And we will learn and grow whether we stay or go. We will learn and grow whether we do or don't. We will be invited into our spiritual growth no matter what we do. And so the question is, what is the place from which we act or don't act? Is it based on society's roles, who we think we are? Well, I'm a person who would never do whatever, or I can't let my family down, or, well, I just have to go do my own thing. I don't care what you think about it. Do you see, all of these are roles that we assume that we know about ourselves. To act or not to act is to move into that place of deep authenticity, where our action comes from the truth of who we are. And we act out of that inner guidance, that inner impulse, not what the world sees. This is spiritual living. Sometimes it looks really odd to other people. Sometimes it can look odd to ourselves. Sometimes we can ask ourselves to do things we would never have imagined. And yet, as we invite ourselves to stand in the truth of our being, we act from that authentic place. And that truth of our being is we are either acting out of the ego worldly self, the self of the senses, the self of separation, Ernest Holmes calls it, the sense of separation, or we're acting from the spiritual, real self. And how often do we make this a battleground? I just can't stop thinking about it. I just can't stop being mad. Oh, I just can't forgive that person. I just can't do that. I just don't understand how I'm going to have money when this is that. And do you see? We make it a battleground. The Bhagavad Gita invites us into a different way of engaging. Rather than making it a battleground, to see that our life itself is the spiritual act, that it is in the way in which we engage, that we are moving our spiritual understanding, and we are actually bringing the very life of the divine to light in the world. You see, when I didn't yell at Aaron, I brought love into the room, and peace, and personal responsibility, as opposed to victim and story and, oh my God, how much is this going to cost to fix, and do I have the money, and what are you going to do to help, and couldn't you have trained your daughter how to drive a car by the time she was 8 years old? For God's sakes, what were you thinking? I mean, and really, isn't it sometimes just that irrational, the place we go to? Spiritual living is that place where we're standing in our truth and we move in the world. This is why the Bhagavad Gita is so powerful for us here in the West, because we aren't a culture of people that retreats to the hermitage. We actually want to make a difference in the world. We want our lives to matter. We want to contribute. We see ourselves as actors and doers. This is not a bad thing when we ground ourselves in spiritual truth. So the Bhagavad Gita teaches us two paths: the path of meditation and contemplation, and the path of selfless service. Selfless service is the way in which we move out into the world. It is the way in which we engage in our lives differently. And do you see, this is our theme, TSRW, this science really works. This stuff really works. But we have to work it. We have to live it. We have to be it in the world. We can't just talk about it. And we can't just sit on our meditation cushion. There's a lovely Zen statement that says, I take my meditation cushion wherever I go. And we could extrapolate from that. I act in every moment as if I were sitting on that meditation cushion. That is the place that the Bhagavad Gita is going to want to take us to. So the next 3 weeks, we're going to be unfolding the paths and practices that come from the Bhagavad Gita that teach us how to do this. Building on our inner work that we've done in prayer last month and the work in consciousness that we did in January, building on all that inner work, this is now the invitation to how do we walk in the world? How do we move in the world? And it's a radical God-intoxicated way of being. And it is very different than the worldly wisdom would have us behave. And is that not exactly the message that we see in the teachings of Jesus? Which is what we'll be exploring when we bring the two together on Easter Sunday. And we really explore this human divine reality that each one of us lives. So I want to invite you to a couple of things then. You know, we have our Wednesday series. Veronica Valles is going to be doing the Wednesday series from here on out in April, and she'll be diving more deeply into this every week so that with the same book, so that you can really mine this for your own personal richness and go a little more deeply into it. And then I want to make the invitation that Ram Dass makes in this book, Paths to God. This is the invitation that I want to make to you in taking up the Bhagavad Gita for the month of April. I encourage you to read the Bhagavad Gita, he says. It will only take you about 3 or 4 hours. I would suggest that you read it through the very first time, just as a very interesting story. Who is Krishna? Who is Arjuna? And how do they find themselves in this peculiar predicament, sitting in a chariot out on a battlefield? So this week, just read it once through. This is why we're giving you Edwards, suggesting Edwards' translation. It's very, very accessible and easy to read. I would further suggest that you plan to read the Gita twice more. So once we have explored the base conflict in which Arjuna finds himself, and after you have personalized that conflict sufficiently so as to understand what his predicament is, I suggest you read it a second time, identifying with Arjuna. That is, once you have figured out what your own conflict is, your own spiritual struggle, then use that as the framework and listen to Krishna telling you how it all is regarding your own battleground. So that would be for next week. And then finally, the third reading. Then, when you are ready, may I suggest a third reading of the Gita. This you'll do right after Easter, in which you read it identifying with Krishna, because that, in fact, is also who you truly are. Let us pray. So just inviting you to go within with me now. Breathing into that inner stillness, that inner place, that inner quiet where we do actually know that this is who we are. This is the one life, the infinite reality, the wellspring of love and laughter and light and playful joy, the presence of the divine, the infinite reality, like a spring fountain bubbling up through each one of us, through all creation, through all beings everywhere, through all of life. And as we breathe into this place and we remember this truth, let us this morning affirm and declare that we stand in this spiritual life, that we no longer see it as a battleground, but we see it as an opportunity for us to stand in our truth, to live from our authenticity, to radically abandon ourselves into the intoxication of love, of life, of joy, of possibility. That we imagine a future different than the past that we've had. We imagine it for ourselves. We imagine it for our loved ones. We imagine it for our community. We imagine it for our planet. And as we do so, we become the very light and love of the divine, pouring a blessing into life through us. This is truly who we are. And so it is.